So I think we are on.
Okay, now, yes, now let me see the option that I have. Ah, that's on, so you can see my screen?
Yes.
Ah, perfect, okay. So if I
Okay,
do...
so just share your screen and we will give all attendees 1 or 2 minutes just to get everybody in the platform, okay?
Okay.
So
But let me ask you a question. Is it possible for me to see the notes that I have under the presentation, under the slides? No. Sì.
Matteo, we are just on, so if you'd like, you can just turn off your video so that I can start.
I'm sorry, Tatiana, just give me 2 seconds because...
Никак не му каже. Да. So hello everyone, just let us give a few minutes to our colleague that is going to start the webinar just in a few minutes. Okay, so now you can see both of us that are going to make today's webinar and present to you some important themes about our GPP Stream project, and afterwards about the role of green public procurement and its role for the resource efficiency. So can we start, Matteo? How are the things at your side?
Can you just give me 5 minutes?
Okay. So just before we start with the presentation, let me introduce myself and our presenter. My name is Tatiana Kurtakova and I work for the Center for Sustainability and Economic Growth in Pazarjik, Bulgaria. So our association, together with the foundation Ecosistemi from Italy, plus 7 more partners, work together to ensure the smooth and proper implementation of the GPP Stream project. Later on, our colleague Matteo will give you details about the project, its objectives, what we have done up to now, activities, and what lies just in front of us, all project partners. Before I give the floor to him, let me tell you that this webinar is being recorded. So you can find a link towards the video later, and you can download it on demand to watch it on demand later in case you or somebody else around you is interested but not present at this webinar. In the handout section that is just right at your screens, you can see some interesting materials that we have elaborated along our project. One of it is the infographic. It illustrates the essence, the meaning of green public procurement. And the other one is the leaflet that we have produced along our project, and it illustrates the activities and the objectives of our project. So we would also would like to hear from you. So in case you have questions, just raise your hand or write them down in the chat section of the platform, and my colleagues and I will try to answer them and give you a reply probably within the session, or if we don't manage, we will do our best to make it with a follow-up email. So let's just go back to Matteo and see whether he can go on, or if not, we can try to make the presentation of the project.
We are having some technical problems just with the webcam. So if it's not a problem, I just ask you for just 2 minutes, five more minutes, to see if we can otherwise I will just we will just manage the webinar without webcam.
Yes, it's fine, Matteo. Just you can share your presentation.
Just give me 5 minutes to switch the personal computer to the computer.
Sure.
Okay, so we are ready to start. I will now share the screen with all of you. First of all, thank you, Tatiana, for the presentation of the for the introduction of the webinar. So let's see if I can share the screen. Okay.
If you can't, okay, we can see your desktop.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Yes, it's perfect.
Okay,
just browse to your presentation. Okay. Yeah, that's perfect.
Here we go. Perfect. So again, thank you for all the participants to this first European project, first European webinar organized by the GPP Stream Project. As Tatiana was anticipating before, the webinar is focused on the role of the green public procurement for resource efficiency. So we will start by presenting the GPP Stream Project for those who don't know them. So as you know, this webinar is targeting a wider audience of people. So also people who don't know the project, the content, the objectives of the GPP Stream Project. So what does GPP Stream stand for? First of all, GPP Stream stands for Green Public Procurement and Sustainability Tools for Resource Efficiency Mainstreaming, and is an Interreg Europe project funded under the Priority Axis number 4, which is related to environment and resource efficiency. And it addresses the program's specific objective 4.2, which is dedicated to improving resource-efficient economy policies. Some general information on the project, on the implementation period of the project. The project started on the 1st June of 2018, and will last until the 31st of May 2022. The overall budget granted to the project is around 1,400,000 euros. As for the partnership, the project is coordinated by region Friuli Venezia Giulia in partnership with 8 partners: from Bulgaria, from Spain, from France, Italy, and Romania, which all have complementary environmental and GPP expertise. 2 of these partners are from Italy, 2 from Romania, 2 from Bulgaria, 1 from Spain, and 1 from France. Moving on to the next slide. As for the objectives of the GPP Stream project, the main objective comes with the following. Let's say the GPP Stream aims at integrating GPP approaches into EU-funded programs and other programs or sectoral plans adopted at national, regional, and local level. In other words, it aims at including environmental criteria into financing instruments and in the implementation of development strategies. As for the main objective, this main objective comes with also the following cross-cutting general objectives, which are improving the regional, improving the regional development policies and programs in relation to the themes of resource efficiency, green growth and eco-innovation, and environmental performance management, improve the management, implementation, and monitoring of the policy instruments through the adoption of GPP approaches, and finally support the GPP Stream partners to transfer the lessons learned to all implementation phases of the policy instruments addressed, and to create a community of stakeholders that can mainstream GPP practices. As for the sub-objectives, so more specifically, the sub-objectives are the ones that you can see on the screen, which are collect and share best practices and support tools for the adoption of green public procurement, improve the integration of GPP objectives and actions within the funding programs and sectoral development plans, improve the capacity of national, regional, and local administrations to align their actions in order to enhance GPP implementation, improve the capacity of monitoring GPP implementation triggered by the implementation of specific policy instruments and plans, and then stimulate the adoption of green demand for goods and services along all phases of policy instruments implementation, including those that are affected but not directly managed by the authorities that developed the instruments. Moving to the next slide. The structure of the project. The project is divided into 2 phases, and each phase is 24 months long. As for the first phase, this is still running. It will end on the 30th of May of this year, and is dedicated to the interregional learning process, which comprises the following activities: analysis and exchange of GPP best practices and case studies by the partners in several learning contexts, such as webinars like this one and face-to-face transnational events. Other activities related to the first phase are the national stakeholders meetings held periodically between each partner and its respective policy instrument stakeholders. And these meetings are aimed at sharing the objectives of the integration of GPP into the policy instruments and receive relevant inputs by the stakeholders. And then another activity related to this first phase is the elaboration of various GPP toolkits, which include tender models, means of proof to verify compliance with GPP, and guidelines for monitoring, as well as guidelines for the definition of the partner's action plan. Finally, during this phase, let's say that the most important activity implemented during this phase is the definition of the action plans, which are the documents that include the practical measures the partners will implement throughout the second phase of the project, to integrate the GPP approach into each partner's respective policy instrument. Like, just to give you some examples of the concrete actions identified so far, we can mention the establishment of help desks to provide support on GPP, the elaboration of toolkits for the beneficiaries of EU funding, or also the creation of specific GPP prizes to award the most virtuous enterprises and most innovative products. As for the second phase, this is also which is also 24 months long. Well, this phase will start on the 1st of June of this year, and as I just said, will be dedicated to the implementation of the practical measures included in the partners' action plans. And this phase will be also dedicated to the monitoring of the improvements achieved through the integration achieved through the integration of GPP into the policy instrument. This phase will be also further dedicated to the dissemination of the GPP practices and know-how gained throughout the project. The GPP, let's say that it's important to mention that these actions plans, these various action plans, which will be defined by each partner, will be ready before June of this year. So moving on to the next slide. So this is the list that you can see in the table on the screen. Is the list of the policy instruments addressed by each partner, each GPP Stream partner. These policy instruments are, you can see the first two highlighted in orange, are the two national action plans on GPP of Romania and France. Then we have the four regional operational programs funded by the European Regional Development Fund, which are addressed by 4 GPP Stream partners, which are the Autonomous Region Friuli Venezia Giulia in Italy, from the Northeast Regional Development Agency in Romania, the Center for Sustainability and Economic Growth in Bulgaria, and the Association of Municipalities of Ribera Alta region in Spain. And then we have the one rural development plan at the regional level, addressed by the Lazio region in Italy, and one urban development plan at the municipal level, addressed by the municipality of Kobrovo in Bulgaria. As you can see, the policy instruments tackled by the partners address very different themes and have very different levels of difficulties in relation with both the general management and the integration of GPP approaches. But we can say that this wide diversity is the point of strength of this project, as it allows to explore and test the effectiveness of the actions to be implemented, to include resource efficient oriented effective criteria in a wide variety of planning and financial instruments. Moving on to the next slide, which are the practical steps, which shows the approach that this project that were let's say adopted by GPP Stream to integrate the GPP, the Green Public Procurement, into the policy, the various policy instruments that I just mentioned. So the practical steps being undertaken by the partners are the assessment of the actual levels of integration of GPP within the policy instrument. Improve the improvement of the monitoring on GPP throughout the whole implementation of the policy instrument, which means putting a system in place to check whether and to what extent the expenses linked to the policy instrument comply with GPP criteria. And then the improvement, another activity is to improve the understanding of the market availability of green products and services, to adjust the GPP criteria levels of emission on the basis of the actual ability of the market to supply those products and services. And then define the specific measure actions to integrate the GPP approaches into the yet to be published funding calls or calls for tender of the actual programming period, which, as you know, runs from 2014 to until 2020. And then, based on the lesson learned so far, identify also the specific measures or actions to integrate the GPP approaches into the next programming period, which, as you know, is planned and will be running from the 2021 until 2027. And finally, another activity undertaken by the partner is the alignment of all the actors involved in the definition and implementation of the same policy instrument to ensure the integration of the GPP approaches is made fully operational and the benefits in terms of resource efficiency are achieved. So moving on to the next slide. So which are the stakeholders? Which are the stakeholders that have been involved throughout the GPP Stream project implementation so far, and that will be continuing. We will keep on involving in the next phase. First of all, we have the regional departments responsible, so representatives, let's say, from regional departments responsible for the policy instrument definition, implementation, and monitoring. Then we have representatives from agency and organizations providing support on the definition, implementation, and monitoring of the GPP criteria. Representatives, we have public and private EU funds beneficiaries, such as municipalities and or enterprises. And then we have associations of producers of green products and services. So which is the main role? As you can see, the main role of these stakeholders is to contribute to the definition of the actions plans through by giving inputs to the work undertaken by the partners. So let's let's go to the GPP Stream action plans. Let's see what they are and why are they relevant for resource efficiency objectives. First of all, what are the action plans? As already mentioned in one of the previous slides, the action plans include the measures that each partner will decide to adopt to integrate GPP approaches into their respective policy instruments. So for this reason, the action plans could be considered as a key deliverable of the project, as they include the practical measures necessary to achieve its main objective. Which is the actual state of play and roadmap in the definition of these action plans. Each partner is now identifying with the support of its stakeholders the joint measures to be included in the documents. The content of the action plan will be gradually developed during the next 4 months. Starting from June of this year, the partners will start the action plan's implementation phase, which will last until the end of the project, which is foreseen in June 2022. It is important also to mention that in parallel with the implementation of the action plans, each partner will also monitor the associated benefits in terms of both resource efficiency and positive impacts on the market availability of green products and services. So let's see a little bit in details which are the type of actions that are being included in the actions plans by the partners. We have the first type is support, the measures are being related to one of these 6 type of actions, which are support to enterprises in the transition towards a more efficient use of material and energy inputs, the enhancement of the governance of GPP policies to align the public spending to both sustainable development and resource efficiency objectives, capacity building of public administrators for the elaboration of green tenders, selection of offers, and management execution of the contract, establishment of tools, methodologies, and practices to account and monitor GPP implementation in environmental and economic benefits, support the dissemination of GPP at all levels of public administration so as to have relevant impacts on the market and the creation of environmental impacts, and then finally improve the communication to citizens regarding GPP and its environmental and economic benefits. So these are the type of actions that will inspire the partners in the selection, identification of the concrete measures to integrate GPP into the policy instruments. But how and to what extent, let's say, are the GPP Stream action plans and their related measures relevant in terms of resource efficiency, which is the main focus of this webinar. So why these action plans are related to resource efficiency? As you can see, let's say that GPP Stream's action plans and their related measures are relevant in terms of resource efficiency because they will be linked by the partners to one or more of the resource efficiency aspects and indicators specified in the metrics that you can see here on the screen, and that are included in the communication of the European Commission on the roadmap to a resource efficient Europe. So, in other words, the action plans is relevant for resource efficiency because they will be ultimately aimed at obtaining concrete improvements in the use of one or more resources, measured on the basis of the various indicators and environmental aspects specified in this matrix. As you can see, this matrix shows for each type of natural resources that you can see on the top of the table, like fossil fuels, materials and minerals, water, air, land, soils, ecosystem, biodiversity, marine resources, and waste. So for each of these type of natural resources, the matrix shows which are the environmental aspects, and so the indicators that should be targeted by the measures which intervene in a certain economic sector, which in this case is the energy sector, if we want to improve the efficiency of that resource. So, for example, if we want to improve the efficiency in the use of the air through the implementation of a measure related to the energy sector, we must ensure that that measure, let's say, reduces pollution with reduces pollution with harmful substances, and use these indicators as the parameter to assess whether or not the objective has been achieved. So these are important indicators that should also be kept in mind if we want to achieve, with the measure that we are implementing, through the measure that we are implementing, we want to achieve a certain resource efficient objective. And so this matrix is very important because it also tells us which are the parameters that we should use to assess whether or not this objective has been achieved. Let's say, so this is just these are just indicators related to the energy sectors, but as you can see in the following slide, we also have the ones related to food sector, building, mobility, and mobility. Another thing to say about this matrix, another important remark, is that all these indicators are also linked to policies, either at municipal level, like for example, reduction of energy intensity of water treatment, which is a typical type of policy related to the municipal context. But these indicators are also linked to policies at the regional level, like for example the reduction of energy intensity of waste treatment, and then they are also related to policies at national level, which could be, for example, the reduction of pollution with harmful substances through the reduced use of fossil fuels. Why this matrix takes into account these four sectors, which I repeat are energy, food, buildings, and mobility. It takes into account these four sectors because are the sectors that are considered to be the most strategic one by the European Union in terms of resource efficiency potential gains. So let's move on to the next slide. To make sure, let's say that, so this matrix it's very important. So to make sure that the action plans were concretely connected with the the resource efficiency aspects illustrated by the matrices that we just saw, the partners were provided with a list of questions that they will need to take into account when identifying the practical measures that will be included in the action plan. As you can see, these are some of the questions that should be guiding the partners in the process of the definition of the action plans. So one question is, which GPP action in your policy instruments are directly linked to one or more of the roadmap resource efficiency objectives? Or another question is, what overall benefits in terms of resource efficiency are expected in which key areas, with a reference to the roadmap? Or how GPP actions promote eco-innovation and green growth? How GPP actions promote environmental friendly and resource efficient goods and services? And how much the GPP actions modify the markets of goods and services? So these are the questions that we provide. We ask the partners to take into account during the process of the identification of the measures to be included in the action plans. Let's say so. Before moving to the next slide. This is what we are doing in GPP Stream to achieve the objective of resource efficiency. So we thought it was important to mention that how we are trying to connect, how we are trying to achieve the objectives of resource efficiency through the implementation of this project. What we would like to do now in the second part of the webinar is to analyze the meaning of resource efficiency. Why? Because we all know that GPP plays a relevant role for resource efficiency. As you know, the criteria included in the calls for tenders or funding calls address a wide variety of environmental aspects. So, for example, GPP criteria for building address the consumption of fossil fuels by improving the energy efficiency and increasing the renewable energy use. GPP, as you know, the GPP criteria also address the materials and minerals used by optimizing their use and using sustainable materials. Let's say that the important thing to say is that some of these environmental aspects considered by GPP criteria can be measured and monitored through the use of specific tools. Let's think of like this, for example, the reduction of CO2 emissions and the elimination of certain chemical substances linked to certain products and services. So for some of these of the aspects of the environmental impacts taken into account by GPP criteria, we already have tools that we can use to measure, to assess the impact, to measure and to monitor the progress towards the reduction of the environmental impacts. For many others, on the contrary, for many others, we still don't have the tools to do so. So the thing is, if we want to use GPP, so this instrument, to fully address resource efficiency, we need to measure and monitor all the resource efficient indicators that we illustrated in the matrix. We just illustrated in the matrix. So including those ones for which we still don't have specific measuring tool. And to do so, as a first thing, we need to understand what we mean when we talk about resource efficiency. So that's the reason why we decided to dedicate the second part of this webinar to the technical and scientific analysis of the meaning of this concept of the resource efficiency. So let's start from the definitions and metrics related to resource efficiency. As you probably know, resource efficiency is a complex concept that is currently being studied by the members of the International Resource Panel of the United Nations. That's why most of the information and graphics that we will show in the next slides are taken from a report issued by this panel. And the report was issued in 2017, and it's called Resource Efficiency, Potential and Economic Implications. This report provides clear. What this report does is to provide providing clear definition of the term resource efficiency, as well as insights on the principles underlying concepts. So, apart from providing the definition of several definitions of resource efficiency, it also explain the principles that are behind this concept. According to this report, resource efficiency describes how effectively economic activities convert natural resources into useful material products or economic output, and reduce the associated impacts on the environment. So this definition clarifies what resource efficiency means, but it doesn't explain how we should measure the effectiveness of this resource conversion. So the question is, how do we measure the effectiveness of converting natural resources into material products or economic output? Let's say that several approaches or metrics have been used at the academic level to describe the effectiveness of resource conversion. So, depending on the type of metrics used, the effectiveness or efficiency with which humans use natural resources could be referred as different functional terms, which are the one that you can see on the screen. There are technical efficiency, resource productivity, resource or emission intensity, and resource efficiency. As I said, depending on the type of metrics that we are using to measure the efficiency of converting the material resources, the effectiveness of converting natural resources into material products or economic output, we must refer to these different terms, and we will see now. We will go now through each of them to see what they precisely mean. Let's start from the technical efficiency. This metric measures the production of an undesirable output, which could be solid, liquid, or gaseous, often resulting in pollution when emitted to air, land, or sea by another factor. For example, carbon dioxide output, resulting from the use of energy. Let's say that in this case, increased resource efficiency implies reducing the environmental pressures that cause such undesirable outputs. For this reason, emission intensity could be considered as the inverse of environmental efficiency. Moving on to the next, let's say, definition of a term related to resource efficiency, which is resource productivity. The term resource productivity, yes. So this metric measures the efficiency or effectiveness of converting material or energy inputs into economic outputs, which are normally measured in monetary terms. This definition of resource productivity has been promoted as a measure of the effectiveness with which the economy as a whole or a particular economic sector or firm generates added value from the use of natural resources. For this reason, we can say that it can be used to determine the extent to which corporate, sectoral, or national economic growth is linked to resource use. Moving on to the next term, which is resource or emission intensity. This metric measures the production of an undesirable yeah, so I'm sorry, I inverted the two. Can you hear me? I was okay. No, I heard a strange noise. So I'm sorry, I inverted the two definitions. So as for the let's say there is the resource emission intensity. I'm sorry, resource efficiency. This is the resource efficiency term. This term does not differ from the different approaches that I just mentioned, but it is used to refer generically to all of them. So in other words, when we are generically talking about resource efficiency without specifying anything else, especially when we don't specify the type of metric that we are employing, we are referring to either the technical efficiency of resource use or resource productivity, which, as I mentioned before, is the extent to which economic value is added to a given quantity of resources, or it can be referred to resource or emission intensity, which again is the extent to which resource extraction or use has negative impacts on the environment. So depending, as I said, so in other words, we can say that we don't have just one indicators, synthetic indicators, to measure the effectiveness of resource conversion. We have different let's say metrics. We have different metrics, and every time that we use a certain metric, we need to refer to a specific term, which are, like, I repeat, the technical efficiency, resource productivity, or resource emission intensity, which are all related to resource efficiency. But as you can probably notice the differences between these terms and metrics in the concept of resource efficiency can be understood as relating to the three key dimensions of the activity in question, along which the effectiveness or efficiency of resource use can be measured. And these key dimensions are the physical resource use or physical output in the case of technical efficiency, the economic value or economic output in the case of resource productivity, and the environmental impacts in the case of resource or emission intensity. It is also important to notice that the various terms and metrics used to describe the natural resource and environmental impacts of economic activities typically differ not only in relation to which impacts are being considered, but also to how each of these key dimensions is being combined to produce a metric. So moving on to the next slide. Apart from providing the definitions of resource efficiency, the report of the United Nations also explores another important concept linked to the resource efficiency theme, which is the decoupling. This concept was originally used to describe the broad management objective of breaking the link between economic activity on the one hand and natural resource use and negative environmental impacts on the other. But more recently, the term is being used to describe a situation in which resource use or an environmental pressure either grows at a slower rate than the economic activity that is causing it. And in this case, we talk about the so-called relative decoupling, or when the situation in which resource use or environmental pressure declines while the activity continues to grow. And in this other case, we talk about absolute decoupling. To better explain the two types of the decoupling that I just mentioned, I would like to show you this picture, and which is also taken from the same report that I've been mentioning so far, so the UN International Resource Panel report. The figure shows as you can see different trajectories. The red one is it shows the increasing trajectory of the GDP, so of the economic outputs that may result from the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This picture also shows, as you can see, it shows also the resource use, which is indicated in the blue line. So as you can see, this blue line is increasing at a much slower rate than the GDP and the economic activity. So the economic output. So in this case, we would have a relative resource decoupling. On the contrary, if you can see the environment, while as for the environmental impacts, while the trajectory of the GDP is increasing, the one related to the environmental impacts is declining. So in this case, we have an absolute environmental decoupling. Moving on to the next slide, the figure that it is shown here is always taken from the same report and shows the 15 economic sectors identified by the McKinsey Global Institute that offer the biggest potential for increased cost-effective resource efficiency, and which represented 75% of the resource savings. As you can see, the sector with greater improvement potentials in terms of resource efficiency are the one related to building energy efficiency, large-scale farm yields, food waste, municipal water leakage, urban densification, iron and steel energy efficiency, smallholder, farm yields, transport efficiency, electric and hybrid vehicles, land degradation, end-use steel efficiency, oil and coal recovery, irrigation techniques, broad price shift, and power plants efficiency. So it is why we put this picture in the slides. We think it is useful to keep this in mind when designing, because it is good to keep in mind which are the sectors that can be most benefiting from the implementation of public policy that aim at achieving resource efficiency objective. So every time when it's important to keep the graphic in mind when designing any kind of policy or strategy aimed at improving resource efficiency. So finally, I would like to also mention that apart from explaining the meaning and the principles behind the concept resource efficiency, this report also provides a useful detailed overview of the wide range of approaches, best practices, and case studies that can be used to improve resource efficiency at either local, regional, or national level. So as you can see from the slide, GPP is only one of the many instruments that can be used to achieve resource efficiency. And it figures under the sustainable consumption and production approach that you can see here on the top of the list. But apart from this approach, we have the 3 R's approach, which aimed at enhancing resource efficiency across different resource streams and sectors through the adoption of the 3 rules of reusing, and recycling. And then, going farther down the list, we have the tailor-made resource efficient policies and practices for different urban contexts, which, as you probably know, are considered to be key contributors to unsustainable resource consumptions. And then we have those policies, let's say, tailor-made for food systems, for mobility, electricity systems, and finally, in the report you can also find the ones that are less, like the residual ones, the ones that are less promising in terms of potential resource efficiency gains. So we decided to include this list of policies because I think it is important also to keep this in mind. Keep in mind that there are many other strategies and policies that can be deployed to achieve resource efficiency of the objectives. And so it is important, so given the complexity of the achievement of this goal, it is important to use these policies, a combination of policies to create synergies, also with eventual GPP policies, of course, already in place, because we think that this is a good way in which the policymakers could ensure greater benefits in terms of resource efficiency. So thank you. This was the end of the webinar. So I don't know if we would like to give the floor to those who would like to make any question. Let's say that we would like to invite you to intervene, to raise your hands in case you want to make any question. And let's say that while waiting to while waiting to receive eventual questions you might have, I would like to anticipate the content of the second GPP Stream European webinar that will be carried out next week. The second webinar will be focused on the impacts the GPP has on the beneficiaries of the EU funds and on the market of green products and services. Among other, yes?
Matteo, can I just interrupt you for a moment? We
Yes,
have a quick question. Is the matrix available online?
yes, yes. It's as I said, the matrix is included in the report of the United Nations that I mentioned in during the webinar, and I can provide you with all the reference. I can also I don't know if I can upload it on the platform in case, or we can just send it by email.
So we can just keep the contacts of Ariana. She's asking the question, so we can just go back to her and send it in an email. Okay?
Of course, of course. So I would like also to add one more thing. So these were the topic that we focused on today during this webinar. As you can see, is quite complex. It's quite like academic. So it was just it was just to give you some like, let's say, food for thoughts in case you want to further explore the topic on your own. So the purpose was also to provide you with all the references to go deeper into the topic. As I was mentioning before, so the agenda of the next webinar will be the impacts of the GPP that GPP has on the beneficiaries of the EU funds and on the market of green products and services. Among other things, the webinar will analyze the potential changes GPP can bring regarding the actual ways of producing and consuming goods and services. So I don't know if there are any other questions, Tatiana?
No questions for now. Just let me take the opportunity to thank all our attendees that joined us today. Thank you for the nice and detailed presentation. And I would also like to urge all Bulgarian attendees to follow us on the next webinar that we are going to organize, and of course all other, because these webinars will be on national languages. And once again, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I also I also would like to thank all the participants to the webinar, and also Tatiana for supporting us on this webinar. And I hope that the participants of this webinar will also take part to the next European webinar, European webinar that will take place next week, and of which we just anticipated the agenda, the content.
Okay, so once again, thank you, Matteo, and I think it's time to close the webinar, and let's wish everybody a nice weekend.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.